People are always at the center of success of any company. The question is, what you need to do to recruit the right people, to have all the legal aspect, to make sure that you're building the culture. In other words, what you have to do in terms of HR. This is what we're going to discuss right now with Vicky Brown from Idomeneo. Enjoy the conversation with Vicky. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. Today, we're going to speak about teams. We're going to speak about building the right team, having the right process. We're going to speak as well about tactical way of when you have to do your payroll, the legal aspect, and also the big obstacle that you have to keep in mind. And we're going to do that with Vicky Brown, who's an expert for many, many, many years in HR. She's got a tremendous career. We're going to talk about it today. But most importantly, Vicky, you're the founder of Idomeneo. You are a former opera singer. We're going to talk about that as well. And I'm very grateful that you're taking the time to speak with me today.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. Thank you so much for the invitation. I am thrilled and really looking forward to our chat.
Me too, especially though you are asking you some questions. But let's start with your journey. What is your career and how did you find yourself in HR and as a specialist of HR?
Well, I was going to school. I was in university and realized I needed to kind of pay my way a little bit. So ended up working in business. And when I finished school, I say working in business because I was going to school for music. When I finished school, continued with, working as an executive assistant, et cetera, et cetera. Found myself at HBO in the very, very early days and found myself kind of drawn into human resources. I was the executive assistant for the head of the office here in LA at that time. And so the New York HR office said, well, somebody has to do all that, tax paperwork and stuff. So you're anointed. And that's how I got into it. California is continues to be such an interesting state as employment laws are rolled out. And so New York said, California is its own animal. We don't know. We can't help you. Here's the number for our labor attorney. Learn what you can. So I actually learned HR at the feet of a labor attorney, and he is counsel for my company today. So.
Oh, wow. So coming full circle.
Mm-hmm, exactly. We have a big loyalty streak here at Idomeneo.
That's awesome. So the name of your company is Idomeneo. So I ask you how to pronounce it. Obviously, with my Belgian origin, the I is the E. So you say it's Idomeneo. And being maybe multilingual, but not in the right way, I ask you what it meant in Latin, but you say, no, it's in Greek. And what is the origin of the name of your company?
So it's the name of an opera by Mozart. I'm a lyric soprano, even though I sound like a contralto, but I'm a lyric soprano, and at least on my good days. And so Idomeneo is an opera that I performed and really loved. And when I got ready to start the company, I wanted something that would remind me of the other half of my brain. So I named it after one of my favorite operas. And it's the name of a king, actually, a Greek king. And unfortunately, I think he dies in the opera, but there you go.
That's awesome. But when you're talking about opera, are you still singing today?
I am not. I took a 1-year hiatus about 8 years ago. So there you go. I was very fortunate to sing with the LA Opera Company and the Master Chorale and the Philharmonic for almost 20 seasons. And that was really, really wonderful. But it also meant that I was scheduled about 2 years in advance. So once Idomeneo really got going, I really needed to focus on her.
That's awesome. I had a corporate event agency in Belgium in the past. One of the main, most amazing, even I remember, is that we took people, private plane, everything from Belgium, and we flew them to Milan to go to the Scala at the premiere of the Magic Flute, which
Wonderful.
was phenomenal. And I had the opportunity to listen to Carreras, Domingo, and Pavarotti, the three tenors, under the Eiffel Tower at the World Cup '98. I was there with clients, and you told me that you actually sang with them.
I did. I was very, very fortunate when they were in Los Angeles to open the World Cup here in LA. I was fortunate enough to be, I was, 47th soprano from the left in the chorus, but I was fortunate enough to work with them, and it was really so inspiring and so wonderful to work with that caliber of talent and to really see all three of them in one place and rehearse with them, and it was really moving.
So I'm not going to do the obvious transition, but still, when you look at the opera, you look at all the choir and everybody singing together. And that's obviously what every and any entrepreneur would try to do, and any leaders within their company. And it's so complicated, and it's probably the most, if the most difficult thing, I believe, in running any business. So we're talking here about small business, not necessarily a HBO size. So what are your first recommendation for people to start building their team? And I know there's a lot to do with delegation, and you are an entrepreneur yourself. So take us a little bit through that journey on you're starting on your own, you have an idea, and then you end up with 5, 10, 15 people. What are your advice?
Yeah, that's exactly the path that most people take, and certainly the path that I took. You start out because you are an excellent producer. And so you're really good at the work. And generally speaking, you start and you do the work, and you're probably doing time for money, something like that.
Mhm.
And ultimately, you realize if you're very fortunate that you have so many clients and so much demand on your time that you really can't scale because you have a limit, you've got a ceiling on the time that's available. And hopefully, you want to scale the organization in such a way that you're not stuck doing time for money all the time. So you start bringing on other people. As you're doing that, really hiring those first couple of people is certainly critical and vital, but don't take it too seriously. Don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. You just need to figure out what needs to get done that either isn't getting done or that you hate to do or that someone else could do better. Write that up in a job description, get it out there, bring people in, interview them. And there's a whole process for interviewing, of course. But basically, what you're trying to do is get at the critical information that you need that either wasn't in the resume or wasn't in their job submission to you. So, but you have to prepare for those interviews. And I am guilty of, I have an excellent staffing director, and she has taught me almost everything I know. And I am guilty of not preparing properly for
Mm.
interviews because most of us entrepreneurs, we are great at selling our businesses. We're great at doing, talking about what we do, how it can be helpful, why it's inspiring, etc. And I would spend a lot of time in interviews doing that, selling the company to the candidate when I wasn't really gathering the vital information from the candidate that I needed. I was doing a surface interview, really, and then performing the rest of the time. So you really have to take care, make sure that you've prepared for that interview, that you know what kinds of questions you're going to ask, dig deep, ask follow-up questions. There oftentimes people are concerned because they feel like someone might be exceptional at interviewing and selling themselves, but maybe they're inflating their experience a little bit or, shaving the corners just a little bit. If you ask follow-up questions and dig deep into true life scenarios, ask them about the time they did that project that didn't go well. What happened? What could the company have done to provide more support for them? What was the client's feedback? How did they handle the client? What was their boss's feedback? How did they handle their boss? When you ask all those follow-up questions, you're probably going to get at the truth pretty quickly. So I think that's really important. So bringing on those first few people, it's important to know what you want them to do. And then it's important to give them the ability to do it. So you've got to train them. You know, I certainly wish, particularly with my early employees, I certainly wish that they could just read my mind, know what has to be done, how I like to do it, and do it
Yep.
exactly, just be little clones of me, do it exactly the way I wanted to do it. But the reality is you have to give people a chance. You have to give them training. I'm a big proponent of standard operating procedures. I think SOPs run my entire business. So you have to write things down, write down what you want done and how you want it done, and then train those people and then back off and give them space to get it under their belt. And they might even bring something new to the party because they're a different set of eyes and a different brain and different creativity and experience. So you really have to, that's the thing about having a team. You have to get out of the way and, give them all the tools that they need. But then you have to get out of the way and give them room to actually bring the value that you hired them for.
It's so important what you just said, giving them tools to hire, to let them do what you hire them for. And getting out of the way is probably the most difficult thing for an entrepreneur. And I always come back to that, and the example that when I started my business for 2 years, I was doing everything.
Mhm.
I was going to prospect. I had an event to organize. Great. Nobody's going to do it better than I do. And then I have to do it myself. And then, oh my God, the project is almost over. I need a new business. And it was like the hamster wheel until obviously I hire people and get out of the way in terms of running the project. But
Mhm.
one thing that you mentioned, and it's also very important for me, that that's something that I always coming back. So one of my favorite exercise with the group I'm coaching is that I'm getting everyone individually to list all the things they're doing for 2 weeks. And then there's 3 columns in front of it. The first one is stop. What do you need to stop? Everybody's got a to-do list. Nobody's got a stop doing list. And that's very important. And the second column is all the things that you're going to delegate. And the third one are the things that you have to do yourself or you want to do yourself. And when you take the column delegate, you can group people and you can start at that moment, indeed, hiring and delegating. Now, for somebody like me who is very bad at interviewing, and it's not even a question of preparing, it's I don't think that this is my strong point at all. So, Vicky, for somebody like me who is very bad at interviewing, I love interview, the last interview about culture and everything, but really, this is not my strong point. What would you advise me to do, and how can I proceed, or where can I get help?
So there are a couple of things that you can do. And actually, I would say probably do them in tandem. First of all, you don't have to be the first person to review those resumes. Part of the fatigue that happens with interviewing people is you put an ad out there, you get a ton of resumes, probably, 50% of them, 60%, sometimes 70% are completely off the mark, nothing remotely around what you need. But you've gone through all those resumes or many of them, and you just get brain fog after a while. So actually going into an interview and then asking people those questions is the last thing you want to do. So I would recommend getting someone, and of course, I'm in HR, so I would recommend getting a professional. But if you have a colleague, if you have a friend, even if you have a family member that has business experience, just to weed out some of the people who are nowhere near what you're looking for. Now, I
Mm.
know that many times people will say, oh, post on Indeed or something like that. You can put in keywords and it will weed all those people out for you with AI. That certainly is possible. But various jurisdictions are beginning to have a lot of regulation around how you use AI and particularly around how you use it to make hiring decisions or promotion decisions. So just be aware of that and be careful. That's kind of sweeping the nation. So it's coming to a
Yeah.
state near you. But I would suggest having a human take a look at those resumes. You look at them, you see someone who has absolutely no experience, but they thought the job looked really good. So they applied. So, it doesn't take someone who's an expert in your industry to know that that person would not be a fit. So, get someone to do that initial piece and then use your valuable time to really hone down the group of resumes that you get. And then be ruthless. I would really chafe if I had to interview more than 5 or 6 people for the first go round. If I hired someone, if I made an offer and it was rejected and I had to like post again for that same job, another 5 or 6 would be fine. So 12 altogether. But I don't want to, if it's the first go round and we're really, zeroing in on that person, I don't want to interview 20 people. I don't want to interview 30 people. There
Mhm.
is I need to be able to get that down to a manageable number by using the paperwork. So that is the first thing. Then once you do that, look at the things on the resume that really inspire you, that you love, that really kind of pique your curiosity. And then look back at the list of what you need done and figure out what is not on that resume. What does
Mm.
the resume not speak to? You're going to start with those questions. You're going to start by drilling in on those questions because that's the thing you really need the answer to. And then you can sprinkle in the, oh, I noticed that you had experience doing this, and that's really intriguing. I'm so excited about that. Tell me more about it. So
Mm.
it doesn't all have to be, I'm peppering you with questions or in a way that's trying to get at your experience. It could be, we're going to celebrate some things that you've done. Tell me more about that amazing experience that you had. How was it? Just like we talked about the opera singing, that kind of a thing. It sets a wonderful tone for the conversation and also allows you to breathe a little bit. You kind of don't have to feel like the interrogator 100% of the time. But basically, the advice from one person who's an HR professional and does not necessarily love the interviewing process either, to
Mhm.
another who doesn't necessarily love the interviewing process. It's one of those things. It's a necessary evil. And as a leader, we have to do it. And keep your thought on the ultimate vision. The ultimate goal is for you to bring in someone to enhance your environment, enhance your organization, and help you take it to the next level. So, this is what you have to go through to get there.
And there used to be those classical, it's almost telegraph question, which I think don't bring anything anymore. But like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And I remember that joke. The guy goes, what one of your weaknesses? Well, I'm very honest.
Right.
Well, I don't think it's a weakness. I think it's a strong point. And the guy goes, I don't care what you think. So it's very honest.
That's very honest. I'm probably going to
Um,
use that.
and so for me, going back to the experience when I built a team in the last project I was involved, there was one person key to recruit, and I spent a lot of time and use a predictive index,
Hmm.
and there's other personality tests. But the goal was really to have long conversations, see there if there was a fit between the two of us, because we were building the whole team, and that would be the key person.
Right.
And going back to a small company, if you are HBO and you have, I don't know, 1,000 employees, two, three bad hire, okay, it's not good, but it's not going to change the company.
Hmm.
If you're a small business, one bad hire can be a disaster. So when you've
Absolutely.
interviewed as the owner of the company, first of all, I have two questions here. First one, do you start the interview yourself or do you ask other people and you're kind of the last one? And second, are you involving the people that basically are going to work with or report to that person in the interview process?
Right. It's what you say about a large company versus a small company is a critical piece because there's nowhere to hide in a small company. You can kind of, bury non-performers in a department far, far away in a large organization, but you can't really do that in a smaller company. So if it's my rule of thumb is if it's someone who's going to be reporting directly to me, then I'm the first interview. I will certainly bring in other team members to speak with them so that they can get an idea of what it's really like working with me. I can tell someone what it's like, but that's my perspective. So I'll bring in other members after the fact. If it's someone that's reporting to someone else, for instance, my director of client relations, if it's someone reporting to her, she will do the initial interviews. And depending on the level that she's bringing in, she'll run them by me. And it's not even, by the time they get to me, it's not even an interview. I'm having a conversation because I just want to get a feel for kind of, do they fit the culture? Who are they? What, really excites them, that kind of thing. But for people who are reporting directly to me, I'm the first interview because I feel like my input is critical to determining whether or not that person goes on in the process. If they can't get by me, then if they got by someone else and they come to me after the fact and they're a no, that's kind of wasting everybody's time because I'm going to be the final decider on that, on that particular hire. So they report directly to me first. And I'm not particularly a fan of group interviews or even having long series of interviews. There are companies who, have rigorous interview processes that can be 5, 6, 7 interviews. You come back, repeatedly. I'm not a fan of that. And particularly in a smaller organization, because most of the time we just need to get on with it.
Mm.
However, I do have to, and again, something that my staffing director, Kate, has told me over and over again, do not offer in the room. Don't offer in the room. I am notorious for meeting someone, really being excited about them, going through the interview process with them, really loving them, and saying, you know what? I think you're going to be a great fit. I'm going to offer you the job. And she's like, stop doing that. I cannot tell you how many times I have found myself in uncomfortable positions because I offered in the room and ended up hiring the wrong person. But
Mm.
we're all not, we cannot be perfect. We're going to make bad hires. It's going to happen. No way to avoid it. The thing is, that whole thing, hire slow, fire fast, that
Yeah.
is even more critical in a small organization because just like someone who's a non-performer can hide in a larger organization and they can't hide in a smaller organization,
Mm.
their sphere of infection, if you will, in a smaller organization is so much more devastating for that company. They can impact and influence the entirety of the remainder of the team. And you
Mm.
can't have that. You need that team to be motivated, be high performing, and to continue to be dedicated and committed to the work they're doing and the vision that you have for the company. So when you have someone in there who's not performing or who has a lackadaisical attitude or, some other performance issue, you've really got to talk to them, let them know it's a problem, let them know
Mhm.
it's a problem that could jeopardize their job, but then you've got to take action. And that is one of the least fun things that we do as leaders in organizations, but it's one of the most important.
Absolutely. And I remember every time I had to, not that it happened every week, but when I had to fire someone,
Mhm.
I got this pain in my stomach, and I know I have to do it, and I have this conversation because I'm always in favor of having the tough conversation
Mhm.
as soon as possible, and then there's some kind of relief for everyone most of the time. For
Exactly,
everyone, it
exactly.
is.
When people aren't performing up to the expectations that the organization has for them or that you have for them, they have the Sunday scaries. They don't feel good. They know inherently that things aren't going well. So when Sunday night rolls around, they start feeling very uncomfortable about Monday morning coming because they know they're going back into an environment where they're not performing well. So, and it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It doesn't even necessarily mean they're a bad employee. It means they're not the right fit for your organization right now. They may walk down the street, start with another company, and become a superstar. Give them the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. And I don't know how many people I know. I'm also a coach for a EO accelerator. The number of person that you hear, I've tried everything. I've had two conversations with that person. I really need to. And 6 months later, they're still there.
Uh huh. Exactly.
So, what's your advice for people that are entrepreneur that realize that in their team somebody is not a good fit?
I have a little framework that I like to give my clients because when you say things like, make sure you have conversations, it's just a little too nebulous for
Mm.
entrepreneurs, I think, particularly since it's something we don't particularly want to do. So, we kind of use that and make it a very elastic kind of a process. But I have pretty much a three-pronged framework. So first of all, Vicky's showing up late all the time. You don't want to talk to Vicky because she does the rest of the job really well and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Showing up on time is part of the job. And if you let that linger, it's going to become a more and more critical part of the job because it's going to get under your skin like crazy. So if Vicky's not showing up on time, have a conversation with her and say, I know you're not, you're late some of the time or much
Mm.
of the time. And that's something that's not really part of our culture. And we really, we need your valuable talent here on time, really working toward the goal. So I'd appreciate that. And that's just a conversation. It's a conversation in passing. It's not a writing down things or anything like that. It's just having that conversation. The next time you have to have that conversation, and that's the next time that she's late, because if you're having a conversation about someone being late and they're late again a week later or 2 weeks later, then you need to, really put a point on that discussion that you've had. So then you call them in and you say, we've talked about you being on time. I notice you're still not on time. It's really important that you are. That's not affecting your job right now. You do all of these other things really, really well, but this is a critical piece of the job. And if it continues, it will begin to have a greater and greater impact on your performance. And you write that down and you send her the memo and you put a memo in the file. It's just memorializing the conversation. That's what you're
Mm.
doing. The third
Mm.
piece is entering into a formal warning process. We've talked about this, the situation has continued, and I need to be really clear with you. I don't want to be unfair or surprise you with anything. So I need to be really clear with you that this issue, if it does not get resolved, could impact your employment here. So this is what I need. I need immediate and sustained improvement in this area. I'm going to write this down so that we're both clear on what's required. And then if she's late again, you've got to let her go.
So 2
Because
strikes and out.
exactly, it doesn't matter. You've had plenty of conversations now. You've escalated, you've shown her the escalation and the importance of the issue for you, and still it's happening. So either she can't or she won't do it. That's going to show up in other areas of her performance as well, by the way. And so you really need to deal with it. And if you don't deal with it, then it also puts a little, arrow in your leadership, because now you're the leader who doesn't follow through, who doesn't uphold what their commitment to what they said. So,
Yeah.
and you're not holding everyone to the same standard, because you don't want the entire team to start showing up late. So it
Yeah.
it really, it feels like it might be super punitive, but really what you're doing, the main thing is consistency. If as leaders we are consistent with our word and consistent with our expectations, then you're well on your way to being a great leader.
Absolutely. It's so important. It's very interesting what you're saying in terms of you put the red line, and if somebody crossed the red line, you need to act. If not, what's the purpose of the red line in the future? Nobody's going to believe it.
Absolutely.
You were
Absolutely.
saying about culture, and I love values. I love what people run the company with, the values, and they hire and they fire based on the values. But one thing that, if it was only one thing, but one thing that is really different for me coming from Belgium, I had a team in Belgium. If I remember, somebody was not performing after not even 3 months, and had to let her go. Cost me 6 months of salaries and full salaries. And there, it's if you pay someone 100, it costs you 252. So that's insane. And here is the at will. So what is exactly at will? What does that mean exactly? And what is possible and what is not possible?
So glad you asked me that. There is so much confusion around what at will is. For the most part, folks, particularly business owners, think that at will means I can fire you anytime, any day, for any reason or no reason at all. And technically, that is the description of at will. However, and now we get the caveats are there are reasons that you will, honestly get a legal action because of illegal termination. So things that either have to do with, or someone can prove it had to do with, discrimination or harassment. All of those things, which is why I think that discussion, those series of discussions, so you're not surprising people, is so important. You really need to show that you have made some sort of an effort. You've notified them well in advance that there's a problem. You've made an effort to help them correct the problem. And now you're at the point where the problem's not being corrected. So if I've had that series of conversations with someone and they come back to me and say, oh, you just fired me because I am a woman. It's like, well, no, we've had this series of conversations around
Yeah.
what the performance issue was. So that's why HR loves you to have documentation, by the way. It's not
Yeah.
just that we're document nerds, although we are, but it's not just that. We like you to have backup. So that is, broadly speaking, what at will is. At will is not every state in the union. Different states, and not a lot of them, but different states have different employment, I'm going to say contractual terms that are typical of employment. So you have to be careful of that and make sure you know where your state's guidelines are. I'm in California. We're very clear. We're at will. We tend to be very, very pro-employee, which is fine. And so although you can terminate an employee for any reason or no reason, it does help to have a series of progressive disciplining conversations. And if you can't have that, I'm not an attorney, so I will put that out there, but do you have legal jeopardy? Do you have some exposure? Well, anyone can sue anyone for anything, quite frankly, but you're in a better position for defense if you've done those pre-conversations. And if you've been clear about the reason for termination. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that you have to tell the person the reason for termination. Some of my clients sometimes feel like They have to give a termination letter that lays out A, B, C, D, and E. In fact, in those conversations, those meetings, those final termination meetings, I typically will not go through a laundry list of what they did or didn't do. I will refer to the prior conversations we've had. We've had prior conversations. You know that there are performance issues. Unfortunately, those performance issues have not improved significantly, and so we're going to have to let you go. The reason I do that is because when I was a baby HR person, I presided over a termination that lasted 4.5 hours. For
Wow.
real. I went through
Wow.
my list. She rebutted every piece of the list, and you get into that back and forth. And then she wanted to go and say goodbye to a few people. So she wandered around the office for a while. And then she had to pack up her stuff. And then it just went on and on and on. So when you actually get in that conversation, remember, short and sweet. The main thing you're going for, it's not to make you comfortable. The main thing you're going for is everyone leaving that experience with their dignity intact. You
Yes.
don't want the employee crying and sobbing and feeling like they're a lousy person. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're over explaining and now you're possibly saying things that can cause some exposure for the organization. You want to be
Hmm.
very clear, specific, reference those prior conversations that you've had. Simply say, the whole thing should take under 20 minutes. This is what's happening. It's unfortunate that this situation didn't work out, and we're going to have to let you go. And then move into the termination document package. So explaining to them, here's the cover letter. This is how you apply for unemployment, blah, blah, blah. So get into the nuts and bolts, then give them their, here's your final check, et cetera, et cetera. Give them the package. And prior to that, make sure that you have planned what you're going to do about their things, what you're going to do about security, what you're going to do about that laptop and their phone, and on and on and on. Have that all set. And again, I recommend that you send employees their personal effects that very day. Send them by messenger, but you send them as opposed to them standing around putting stuff in a box. Putting things in a box and walking through the office is not conducive to maintaining your dignity with your colleague. So,
Mm.
make sure you've planned what that day looks like for you and for that person. And then, let them go. If you think there's an issue and you need to have a witness there, then have either, human resources if you have it. If not, if you're the head of the company, even if it's your executive assistant, make sure you have someone else there if you feel that's necessary. And, hopefully you don't feel like security is necessary, but if you do, put them on alert as well. Just be sure that you've thought through the entire process before you walk into that meeting.
You hear so many stories to the extreme sometimes. Now, in your experience, they're the majority of people that are just, you know, separated ways, but remain in good terms, or it's just like we're not going to see each other again at all. Because I also realize that you might be in the same industry, so you might meet them again at a trade show or another meeting, and you never know where you're gonna start working with them, and or
That's
become a
exactly
client of the company.
That's exactly right. And that honestly is another reason, albeit, somewhat selfish on my part, but that's another reason to make sure that you let that meeting, that situation be filled with as much dignity for them as possible. You don't want to break someone down. That's not the point. And
Yeah.
I always say attack the problem, not the person. So it's not you did this, you did that, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. It was our expectations were this, and this was actually what we received. And those two things aren't aligned. So,
Mhm.
for that reason, we're separating your employment. The majority, to answer your question, the majority of separations that I see very, very often, I would say the vast majority, that company probably doesn't see that employee again. But there certainly have been situations where it's happened. And certainly it's been situations where it's happened where that employee was in a position to make a recommendation or to make a decision that could impact the company. And
Mhm.
so it's always good to the best of your ability, leave on good terms. You want that person to feel like, you know what, I felt badly because I kind of like that job and they don't want me to do that job anymore, but I moved on and I did something greater. That's what you
Mhm.
want them to feel.
And I love the key word you mentioned is dignity. be respectful of people, and but at the end of the day, as a business owner, the business has to work, and not only has to make money, but it make sure that the culture
Right.
is there, because that's on the long term what it's making the strength of the company.
That's right. That's right. And I always tell my clients that, your role as the top of the organization is to make sure that that organization survives and thrives because you have accountability to all of the people and all of the families that are inside your organization. If the
Yep.
organization is not successful, nobody eats. So it really is important that you keep your eye on what the ultimate goal is. And if that means that there's a non-performer or someone that just isn't providing what you need, then you need to move on because that is affecting the health of the organization.
Another thing is, I always told my daughters when they come back from school and I get extra credit, I said, there is no extra credit in life. And they go, Dad, come on. And sometimes I wonder, when we have, the kids, that everybody's getting a medal, everybody's winning, everybody's this, everybody's that, and we don't want to offend anyone. And then you go in real life, it's not always,
Mhm.
it's not always kumbaya, and then, or pink, we say in French, c'est pas rose tout le temps. It's not always, in the quiet environment and respectful one. What do you see with the different generations working with each other in terms of that aspect, and how often you need to give feedback? In the past, it was once a year. I think if you do that once a year now, 75% of the people are gone. So
Right.
what do you see there in terms of HR?
So there certainly is a generational difference, but also, and I think many times folks in my generation, I won't mention which one that is, but folks in my generation think of the other generations in term of, oh, those Gen Xers or oh, those Gen Zers. But what I think we neglect to understand is it's not just the generation that they're in, it's the season that they're in their life. They are at an age where maybe they haven't experienced working very
Mm,
often. Also, we have to be honest. The past few years have been absolutely chaotic. I mean, it's something that none of us have ever gone through before. And it's had a major impact on how people feel about their work, how they feel about their lives, how they feel about themselves. I mean, it really has been significant. So there's that as well. But also, they're at a different season of their life. They might be early 20s or mid or late 20s or early 30s. And when I think back to being in that season of life, I was curious, I was impatient, I wanted everything right away. I thought I was the best thing since sliced bread. That just comes with that season. So
mm,
it's not necessarily that Gen X or Gen Zers are, selfish and can't be managed and all of that. You do have to. I have a teaching credential, and the one thing that really hangs on for me is that you have to go to where students are in order to teach them. So, with your employees, you have to understand where they are. You have to go to where they are so that you can mentor them and lead them and guide them. And it's incumbent upon us, and it makes our jobs complicated. Absolutely. Used to be much easier back in the day. I'll do what I said because I said so, and I'm your boss, and I pay your check. While I'm of the generation where I still believe much of that, but the fact of the matter is, people also understand their value, and they want to work in an organization that aligns with their values, that has a vision that they're in alignment with. Back when I started working, vision, please. Employees didn't want vision. You just fought for what the salary was going to be when you started and how many vacation days you were going to have. That's not the case anymore. And that's not the case across generations in today's working environment. So
mhm.
we as leaders have to understand that. We have to understand that people are thinking much more about their entire life, not just their work life. And
Mhm.
while I am a staunch advocate that I as your business leader am not responsible for your personal life, you are responsible for your personal life. But I need to do everything I can not to impede, to help you do what you need to do. That doesn't mean that we give the organization short shrift. It doesn't mean that it's your personal life to the detriment of the organization, because if that's the case, then this probably isn't a fit. We need your commitment. We need your good work. We need your time and your talents. But then we also need to not take advantage of that and not be so demanding that you then can't have a personal life. So it's a delicate balance. And as far as the immediate gratification thing is concerned, laying out expectations. One of the things we don't do when new hires start is most of us don't. I know for years and years I didn't. We don't take the time to say, I can't guarantee anything for you because I'm a small business and we'll have to see how, revenues go. But
Yeah.
best case scenario, this is what a career path could look like. These are what the milestones could look like for you. And these are the things that I would expect for you to go from this job to that job, or this role to that role. And this is the improvement I would expect to go from that role to the next role. And then put those things in place. And it's easy to do. There are all sorts of things you can do these days to get additional education for your team. You can buy them all a Skillshare
Yeah.
membership. I mean, there are tons of things you can do. So, make sure that you are contributing to that in some way. People want to know that you care about their growth.
You know, I'm listening to you, respecting people, caring about people, and being straight with your values. That, to me, the three pillars to build a great culture and a great business. Now you have people that are working from anywhere. The people in the office, people. I'm not even talking about delegating or outsourcing outside of the country. How does it work? And I suppose there's difference between 1099 W-2, but how does it work when you are a company in California that has 3 team members in Texas, 1 in New York, 2 in Florida? How does that work?
Well, there are a couple of things you have to keep in mind. There's the compliance side of things. So the compliance side of things is, first of all, in your handbook somewhere in your policies, you need to have guidelines that if an employee is working anywhere other than on site or at their home address, they need to notify you. The reason is, particularly during the pandemic, people were like, oh, I'm going to go visit my parents in Aspen and just be off the grid and I'm going to work from there. And the employer didn't even know that all of a sudden they have an employee in Aspen and there are specific rules and guidelines there. So you can't be in California and have an employee working in Chicago and ignore the fact that Illinois has its own set of anti-harassment training requirements. So you
Mm.
need to know what rules you have to adhere to. And if you don't know what they are, then you don't know. Also, payroll. If someone is working the majority of the time in Illinois, for instance, if they get to the point where they have to claim unemployment or, heaven forbid, disability, where are they going to claim it? California or Illinois? And if
Mm.
you weren't paying unemployment in Illinois, Illinois wants to know why not. So you really need to know where these folks are. And once you know where they are, then you need to take the proper steps. You need to make sure that their payroll is happening in the proper location. You need to make sure your workers' comp, you have a rider that hits extended to where they really are. Because even though they may not be seeing clients, they might trip over a cord to their computer and hurt themselves. You need workers' comp for that. So all of those things have to be top of mind for you. So aside from the compliance piece, there's the whole just interpersonal piece. How do you lead a team? How do you motivate a team? How do you manage people? Oh, I'm going to monitor their keystrokes to make sure they're really working. That's not really part of the way I approach leadership. If I have employees and I feel like I need to monitor their keystrokes, I probably have some additional problems with those
Yeah.
employees. So I
Yeah.
need to address that. I believe in it's all about performance. So if we're not, if the projects aren't getting done, you're not meeting the deadlines, if those things are not happening, then we're going to start having conversations. I don't need to know how long you were sitting in front of your computer. Yes, I want you available for the clients. And if we call, you need to answer. But, I don't need to know that you got up for 15 minutes and went to take the laundry out of the washing machine. I don't need to know that.
Yeah.
So it's important that you understand how you're going to really monitor performance. And again, that means you need to have really solid SLAs and really solid goals in place and really solid milestones in place. all of this sounds like I'm saying it requires more work from the leadership than it used to back in the day. It does. It requires more these days to be a leader than it did in the 50s. No, I was not a
Yeah.
leader in the 50s, but it does require more than that because again, it's not just the do it because we've always done it that way or because I said so. People want to know reasons. They want to know how you're going to monitor them, how you're going to give them feedback. They want feedback on a regular basis. And in fact, all of that is good for you and the organization because the more often you give feedback, the more opportunities for course correction you have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What you were saying about the employment, different state, Illinois, that applies only for W-2s, right? Not to 1099.
That's correct. Only now, the thing that could be is different states, there are federal guidelines around what qualifies as an independent contractor or a 1099 and what doesn't. But different states also have their sets of guidelines. California, again, my favorite, has her own set of guidelines. And so if you have an independent contractor in New York, that's one thing. But if you have an independent contractor that's working for you in California, you just need to be clear about what the California's guidelines around independent contractors are.
Vicky, I could speak hours with you. Obviously, more than an expert. You're a living goddess in terms of HR and what to do. What is the best way for people to reach out to you if they have any question?
Well, actually, we have a little podcast gift for your listeners. So, and I'll give you the link. I will say it right now. I'm a fan of long names for some reason. Anyway, it's morehuman.info/podcast gift. So you can reach us there, and that also will give you a little gift, little guideline around, human resources, hiring, terminations, things like that. So it'll give you some documents and a little guidance around those issues.
Wonderful. And I see you on LinkedIn as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, there was Vicky Brown from Idomeneo. Website is idomeneoinc.com. Vicky, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of all your knowledge with me today. And I look forward to meeting you in person in the future.
Likewise, it was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Vicky, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your vast knowledge in this important issue of managing people and building a great culture. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please follow me on LinkedIn or go on the website eventbusinessformula.com. There's a lot of resources. And if you enjoyed this conversation or learn anything, please share it with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.